crafters, and welcome back to the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. My name is Deepa from Designs by D, and today I am sharing two cards for you. This is basically a 2-for-1 card deal. So we're going to make one image and create two cards with it, and we're going to do this by doing some coloring on stencils. So I'm using the Blooming Halo stencil set. There are 6 stencils here, and you can use the stencil, and there's also a coordinating die to cut this out if you would like to do that. However, we are just going to use the stencils today. I'm using the Karin Brush Marker Pro set. These are gorgeous. They are watercolor markers, so they're perfect to use with stencils to create somewhat of a watercolor effect. I'm really excited to use them. This is my first time using them, and I'm just going to pick some colors from here that I think work well. Now, you can use this without water and just kind of use the colorless blender that's there, which is what I think I'm going to do today. I think I'd originally planned to use a water brush, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I've got watercolor paper here. This is just some cold press watercolor paper. It is a larger pad, so it's 9" by 12", and I just cut that huge sheet in half, so it's about 9" by 6" here. A little bit shorter, 9 by 5. So I'm using a larger panel because remember, we're going to cut this in half to kind of make two cards, so that's part of the planning. We're going to do this blooming halo in the center of that panel. What I like to do is look up online ahead a wreath or a color scheme that I like to follow, and I'm not sticking to it exactly. I'm just loosely following it to get an idea of the colors that I want to use. So I'm just going ahead and grabbing some colors based on what I'm seeing. Now, with any set of markers, crayons, any type of colors, you're not going to get the exact colors that you're trying to find or match up online. I find I get a better match with that if I'm doing ink blending and I have a large selection of inks. But for these markers, I'm just going with what's close, and it doesn't have to match exactly. You can see already from the picture that I showed you and the final product in the first few pictures in this video that it looks very different. We're going for more of an artistic look here. Nothing, I mean, if there's some bleeding outside of the stencil, that's not a huge deal. You don't have to be neat. It's all about being messy. I love doing artistic type cards like this because, like I said, you don't have to worry about being neat and making sure everything lines up and goes together well. And, well, of course you want your color scheme to kind of go together well, but other than that, you're good to go. So I'm choosing stencil 1 here, as I mentioned. Like I said, the flowers are stencil 1 and 2, and I've kind of got it up there in the left corner, the colors that I'm going to be using for those Karin markers. I'm using rosewood and soft peach. I've basically attached my watercolor panel to this is just a cutting board. I think I got it from the dollar store or something. Really cheap. I use it for any time that I do any type of art projects where I might be watercoloring or something like that. It just creates a nice hard base, and it also allows you to move this around if you want to kind of move your image around while you're coloring it, which I really like. So I've attached the panel, and then I've attached the stencil right to the center, right? Remember, we want to cut this out, and we're going to cut this blooming halo in half. I'm starting off with the soft peach and the rosewood. I'm adding the peach to color in the majority of the stencil, and then I'm kind of coming in certain areas to add a little bit of darkness with the rosewood to just create a little bit of depth and a mix of colors. You don't have to do this. You can stick to one color if you'd like, but I just kind of wanted that variation in color to create a little bit of change and interest. Now keep in mind, as you do this, you are going to be mixing the colors. The tip of your marker will get a little bit dirty. That, I mean, it's something that it happens. And if you look at the pamphlet for the Karin markers, they actually have like a guide that shows you how to mix colors. And what you do is you touch the tips together So the marker on the top would bleed into the marker at the bottom, and then you can kind of color like a two-tone thing. Start off with the color you added and end off in the color of the marker. So I've used other markers like this. There's chameleon markers. If you've used those before, you kind of have to charge them up and then mix the colors like this. They work in the exact same way. I'm not doing that in this video. Maybe I'll save it for another video so we can kind of see how that works. But for now, I'm just mixing the colors. As I said, if your tips get a little bit dirty, as long as the color coming out of it is the color it should be, that's completely fine. And keep in mind, you also have the colorless blender, which I'm going to end up using with the greens to kind of blend out the green color. And the same thing's going to happen with that. The tip's going to get a little bit dirty, and then you just kind of color on a scrap piece of paper to get that excess color off of your nib. So I'm basically coloring everything in, adding the two tones. I noticed that the Karin markers, they have a lot of ink in them. They have a lot of watercolor. There's a lot of color to it. So you'll see bleeding. You can see a bit of it coming out. That's because there's a lot of ink. And remember, we're using watercolor paper here. That's going to soak that color up like crazy, right? So if you don't want to just use the plain, like the color, and have it so vibrant, what you can do is, you see how I was kind of adding more of the color on the edge and then blending it out with the other color and things like that. What you could do is add the color on the edge and then use a watercolor brush, which was my initial plan, but I decided to change that. Use your watercolor brush to kind of pull out the color so that your image is a little bit softer, less vibrant, if that's the look that you're going for. I mean, nothing is right or wrong. You can always play around with these things to get the image to work for you, to get the final product to be the way that you want it. And you'll notice when I pull the stencil off, you'll get a lot of sharp lines, and these are the lines just from sticking within the stencil from one layering stencil to the next. If you don't like that look of the sharp lines, I'm going to show you how to soften that up, and that's really the feel that I want for this card. So I wanted the colors to be vibrant, which is why I did not use the water brush to kind of pull out the color. I'm using a lot of color from the brush that's all coming out. I'm not pressing hard at all, like it's literally flowing. The color in these markers is amazing. But you'll see that like there is a bit of bleeding. It looks more red than peach. So I kind of wanted the colors to mix a little bit more. So in the end, I'm going to show you how I soften that up. For now, I'm going to move on to the next stencil, and this is the open part of the leaves. So there's the open part of the leaves, and then there's the detail portion of the leaves. I don't think I end up using the detail portion for the leaves, but I do add the berries in that next stencil. But for this one, I am going with green. So I'm using Lush Green, and then I'm kind of mixing it with the neutral gray number 3. So I wasn't too sure where I wanted to go with this. So I originally just started with the Lush Green. You'll see now I'm sort of adding the neutral gray as more of the darker tone. And I'm using the clear colorless blender to now blend out the color. And you can see the green a little more. So the initial bit of color I lay down is very deep and dark, but as I blend it out, you can see more of that greeny color, which looks really pretty. So that's generally how I'm going to color in this stencil. So keep in mind, this is stencil number 3, and these are just mainly the majority of the leaves here. And I'll continue in this manner. Now you'll notice I have a scrap piece of paper there. You'll see I'm kind of just rubbing off the color from the colorless blender because there is a lot of green here. It's kind of gumming up not gumming up, but it's basically, you can see it coming onto that colorless blender. And if you're like me, you want to make sure that you clean that every so often so that it doesn't completely stain it, so that when you go to mix or to blend another color, you're not getting an excess of green in there, so you're not going to get any contamination of color. So that's what I meant by kind of wiping it off on a scrap. And you can see here, as you like blend out the color, it looks really pretty. I wish I'd actually gone ahead and done this on the flower as well, but as I said, this is my first time using it, so we're learning together. I like to do that. And yeah, I think this is a nice look. So you don't have to technically use this with water. You can use it with the colorless blender, which gives a really vibrant color. So I think that's the difference. When you use the colorless blender, you can color from one tone to the next. and you keep your colors more vibrant. However, I did do a reel. If you check the Crafty Meraki Instagram channel, there is a reel on there with the Karin markers as well, where I do use the water. Well, I just use a paintbrush with water, and I'm blending out the colors with the paintbrush, and the colors are still so vibrant. So I really have to lend that to Karin, that these markers are beautiful for color. Even when you add water, the tone is gorgeous. You can see even when I blend out that green, look at the blended out color. It's a really gorgeous green. It's very pretty. So there was a little portion there where a video there where I showed you that I came in with stencil number 5, and I quickly colored in just the berry portions in almond colored Karin marker. There are the detailed portions for the leaves. You could add that if you wanted to, but I found that the leaves were just so deeply colored already. I didn't want to add any more and kind of overpower that watercolor paper and have extra bleeding and just kind of make the color too dark. So I just kind of left that alone. Now I'm coming in with the last stencil, and this one just has some extra leaves on it. This one is stencil number, I'm looking it up right now, stencil number 4. And I just chose to go with the neutral gray number 3 again, just to add some highlights here because it is lighter than the color of brown, which I chose here called henna. And this just gives it a little bit more of a rustic look. If you looked at the original wreath that I looked at, it looks nothing like this. But I just liked the colors of the greens with the reds and then the yellow and the browns. This would actually make a really nice fall or Thanksgiving card, but I'm going to make this more of a generic card. And don't forget, we're making 2 cards out of this. So this is a great technique, whether you want to use these colors, these markers, or ink blending or something else. This is a great technique for creating lots of cards because, as you can see here, I'm going to get 2 out of this rather than 1. Maybe the coloring takes up a little bit more time, so ink blending would work a little better if you're wanting to do some mass production in this manner. But I thought, let's kind of change this up a little. We use stencils a lot in card making, and we always do ink blending. Let's try using it with markers, right? Okay, so it's time for the fun part. I absolutely love this part of this card, which is basically the softening it up portion. I'm grabbing some perfect pearls. I've got some perfect pearls, so the plain pearl color, and then I'm also grabbing some of the gold here. I'm just adding a little bit on, this is basically my makeshift palette. So I just have a piece of cardstock which I've laminated, and I use this anytime I'm doing painting and I want to mix colors or anything. So I'm just adding some water to the gold and the perfect pearl separately. And I'm grabbing a paintbrush, and I am just going to do a whole bunch of splattering. And when I say a whole bunch of splattering, I mean a lot of splattering. Now remember, the Karin markers are water-based. We're adding all of the splatter, which is water-based. I'm hoping that it's going to move some of the colors that we've put down in this wreath and create a nice soft look, kind of soften up the hard edges. Like I said, I am sprinkling this all over the place, and then I'm going to add some of the gold as well, and you're going to get that mix of water. You could, if you really wanted the color to move, spray it, spritz it with some just plain old water, but then I didn't really want to get too much of the smudged look. I just wanted to soften up the edges. So you can see there up close that some of the edges are bleeding a little bit. It is softening it up just a bit. So I'm gonna actually, I've added a lot of water for sprinkling. So I'm just gonna dry it up here as much as I can. And now I'm going to grab some, so this is just gouache. This is white gouache. You could use white acrylic ink if you have that. I'm just adding some water to it, and I'm loosening up the paint. And then I'm just going to splatter this on there too. We're going to create a whole bunch of splatter, and the splatter is really what's softening up this image. So we added the water-based sprinkles of perfect pearl and gold, which softened that up to begin with. Now we're adding that white, which creates, it kind of again softens it up because the white is going to cover up a little bit of the color and blend in a little bit more to the background. And then finally I did the exact same thing, but I used some black gouache as well, just to create a little bit more splatter. And the black really shows the splatter a little bit more compared to the white. Now that everything is dry, I've gone ahead and I've cut this panel in half, halfway through that blooming halo. And then I just have to kind of cut down both of these panels to fit an A2 size card base. And as I do this, keep in mind, because your wreath is in the center of your cardstock, you're gonna have to cut it on either side of the wreath to make sure it stays centered when you're cutting it down to fit your card base. So now I want to add a sentiment. So I've kind of stuck my panel to my Altenew stamp wheel, and I'm grabbing the You Inspire Me stamp set. Now, I like this stamp set because it has those nice scripty words, and it's in like, I wanted something with like a long sentiment that I can kind of put at the bottom here to kind of help it stand out a bit. I like the classic look of the handwriting in this one, so I mainly picked this one for the look of the handwriting of the sentiment. This says, "Do small things with great love." I'm going to stamp this out twice using some VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink. And I did do it twice, and you probably will have to do it twice, because keep in mind we're stamping on textured cardstock, the watercolor cardstock. So stamp positioner comes in handy here. So now I'm stamping out a second sentiment on the second card, which says, "Enjoy the little things in life." And even though I randomly picked this stamp set because of the look of the font and the small, like the size of the writing, I love these sentiments. They're such everyday sentiments. These cards are perfect for somebody who might be going through a hard time, and I've been going through a little bit of a rough patch here and there. Everyone has their days, right? And getting a card with these very thoughtful, and I like that they sound like quotes. They're great sentiments to kind of live your life by. So this is a great way to make some cheer me up cards, is what I like to call them. So I'm going ahead and I'm attaching these to a card base. Because I didn't do too much heavy watercoloring or adding too much water to these watercolor panels, I just use some normal adhesive to attach these. When I do more watercoloring and the panels are a little more warped, I like to kind of put them through my die cutting machine without any dies to flatten them up. And then I like to use a stronger adhesive, some double-sided adhesive, to attach it. But in this case, normal adhesive should work just fine. Now for the final step, which is to add some bling. There's a lot of splatter in the background, so I didn't want to add anything that was had too much of a contrast. So I grabbed some of the Magical Iris Sparkle Crafty Meraki gems, because they're just kind of white, clear gems that have an AB sparkle to them. So they're really just going to pick up some shine and the light just a little bit, and just create a little bit of shimmer on your card. So I'm adding a bunch of those. I think I added 7 in total. I always mention this. I like to add odd numbers because they're always they tend to look better than adding an even number of gems. Maybe that's just me. I know it's an art principle, but it really doesn't matter. Do what works for you and what you think looks good. So I'm just gonna add more of those gems to the second card, and that's pretty much going to be it for these cards. That's going to wrap those two up. I hope that the technique I've used here by using the Karin brush markers with the stencil is something that you might give a try. Gives you a little different perspective on using stencils instead of just doing the regular ink blending. And these cards are pretty simple and easy to put together. So I hope that you'll give this a try. Let me know what you think of them in the description down below, in the comments. And do keep in mind that all of the products that I've used here are included in the description down below. You can check out the Crafty Meraki store there. I've got a link there. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. I'd love to answer them. Have a great weekend, guys. And I hope to see you guys next Saturday for another crafty video. Bye.